Hello and welcome to our video on the integration between Deputy and Sage 50 Payroll. How this video will work is we'll have a quick look at how Sage is configured. We'll then show you how to configure Deputy to get the integration working, and we'll then review importing time and attendance data from Deputy into Sage. So if we start by looking at the Sage platform, we can see we've got 9 employees loaded at the moment. If we go to our pay elements, we can see we've got 9 different pay elements created on the platform as well. And again, what we've basically done to show the dynamics of the integration is ensure that each employee has a separate pay rate associated to their profile. In terms of time and attendance data, we can select all of our employees and look into timesheet entry. Again, here we're going to see a list of all pay elements we've got stored on the platform and their allocation to employee profiles. So for example, we can see that Ashley has 127.5 hours logged to her pay element of £10.20. Now, the idea with the integration is that we'll be getting these figures imported into Sage somewhat automatically from the time and attendance data collected in Deputy. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is cancel out of here. We're going to go to reset payments and reset all of our time and attendance data for this particular pay period. So again, if we click on finish, and again, we're going to select all of our employees, go to timesheet entry. And now we can see that whereas before we had hourly figures for each of these pay rates, they've all now been zeroed out, allowing us to process a new pay run for employees and get fresh time and attendance data from Deputy into Sage. So that process begins by ensuring that we've got the right configuration in Deputy itself. You can see on the left here next to each employee, you have an employee reference code. Now that needs to match your timesheet export code in Deputy exactly. So what do we mean by timesheet export code? Well, let's jump into Deputy. Each employee profile, so for example, if I click on Ashley's employee profile from the people section and I click on edit, each employee profile has a timesheet export code under the pay rates section. So by default, this is blank. The idea here is that we add a timesheet export code for each employee that matches the employee code in Sage. So if we quickly check here, we can see we've entered an 8 for Ashley. If we jump across into Sage and look at Ashley's profile, we can see that matches her employee reference code exactly. Now, we will need to go in here and sort of edit each employee profile, making sure that they've got the right export codes matching Sage. But to actually check that your employees do match between the two platforms in terms of pay rates and export codes, go to the people section, click on also show, and you can add an additional 2 columns here. So you've got your timesheet export code and pay rates. You can also click on filter and ensure that you're only displaying employees who have an export code. And then just do a bit of a sanity check between the two platforms. So for example, let's choose an employee at random. Liam Jones is referenced as having an export code as number 5 and a pay rate of £9 per hour. If we go to the Sage platform, we can come here and see Liam, yes, has a employee reference of 5. So that matches exactly. And again, if we double click on Liam's profile, go to the employment tab, click on pay elements, we can see that Liam's pay rate here in Sage is £9. So we can see that the match here between employees in Deputy and Sage is correct. You don't need to worry too much about the pay rate name in Deputy matching the name in Sage. We will be mapping those between the two platforms later on in the video. So we've gone through our Sage configuration. We've got Deputy configured correctly to start looking at importing time and attendance data into Sage. So the next process is that you let your employees come to work. they'd be starting and ending their shifts. Timesheets would be created automatically on the Deputy platform, which would then be approved by managers, and all approved timesheets would appear in the export section of the platform. So for the purposes of this video, we're doing a pay run for July. So you can see your start and end dates here. Your employees are on the left. To get the export rolling, you choose select all. You'd then be able to see a summary of your export on the top right. So in terms of the amounts and the hours, with regard to the Sage export, we will just be exporting hours. Sage will then use those hours and the pay rates to calculate the exact amounts that your employees should be paid. So we're going to start the export by clicking on Export Selected Items. You will see a couple of new options in this drop-down menu: Sage 200 Payroll, Sage 50 Payroll. These are basically the same export formats, but we're going to choose Sage 50. We're going to give the export file a bit more of a memorable name, so maybe we'll call it Sage Import July Payroll, and we'll click the Export button. This will then take all of the time and attendance data and create an Excel file that's in the exact format that we need to import into Sage. So if we click on Download File, we'll be able to open up that file and show you the format. The format is relatively straightforward. You've got a column for your employee reference code that will match up the employees in Sage, and each column that each individual pay rate that you have in the export will be referenced by a separate column in the Excel file. So for example, if we expand these columns, we can start to see those individual pay rates in the file. And for example, we know employee number 1 is Ed. Again, if we just quickly flick over to Sage, employee reference 1, Edward Simpkins, and we can see from this file that he has worked 75 hours at a pay rate of £11. Other employees, so for example, employee number 8, will have a mixture. So she's worked 8 hours under holiday pay and 127.5 at £10.20. With regards to holiday pay, you do have the ability to integrate it as an additional pay rate in the Sage platform at your discretion. So if we close this file, and in fact, let's just save this file to our desktop to begin with. So we'll click on File, we'll click on Save As, and we'll move it from Downloads to Desktop. It's being saved as a CSV file, and when we click on Save and Minimize to Desktop, we can see our file here, ready for import into Sage. So if we jump back over to Sage and click on File, you need to go to Advanced Data Import. And again, this will open up a wizard that will help us transfer our time and attendance data from the Excel file into the Sage platform. If we click on Next, we're going to be given a number of options to choose a template. There's a few rendering issues here, so we can't actually see the template names, but we know that the one we need is the one at the bottom, which is called Timesheet Payments. How these templates basically work is they contain a number of fields that correlate to the time and attendance data that we need to get into the Sage platform. That gets loaded, and then it's just a case of mapping the fields in the Excel file to the fields in the template. So if we click on Next and we browse for our file, we go to Desktop and Sage Import July Payroll. That gets loaded into the box. We need to make sure that Import File has header row is checked, and that just makes sure that the headers in your Excel file get brought over to enable you to do the matching. When we click on Next, we'll be able to see, if I clear this map, we'll be able to see our payroll fields on the right-hand side, and these correspond to the fields in the template. What we can see at the moment is that the headers haven't been brought over from the Excel file. So no need to worry if this hasn't occurred. Sometimes there are issues with bringing CSV headers over from CSV files. If we click on Cancel, we're going to exit out of this dialog, go back to our Excel file, and instead of saving it as a CSV, we're going to click on Save As, change the file type to Excel Workbook. So we're looking for a .xls or a .xlsx extension. We'll change the file name from Sage Import July Payroll to add XLS at the end. Ensure that we're saving to desktop and click on Save. So again, we're just going to try the import again, and instead of using a CSV file, we'll use an XLS file. If the CSV file works for you, perfect. If not, definitely try to use an XLS file, and it will get around that import of headers issue. So again, same process. We go to File, we click on Advanced Data Import, we choose the right template. So we know it's the one at the bottom, Timesheet Payments. We click on Next and choose our file. You will need to change this option down here from comma separated to Excel to make sure that that XLS file comes up. And when it does, click on the file, it gets loaded into the box. This box is ticked, so we're bringing over headers. We click on Next. We do have a map already loaded. When you do this for the first time, you won't have any previously loaded maps. So what you'll see is this file here will be blank, and you'll have to manually choose your headers from your Excel file. So remembering that this column here represents the headers in the Excel file. This column here is the headers in the template that will load the data into Sage. So employee reference logically matches employee reference. Works number and notes we can ignore. And then it's just a case of sort of going through and matching each pay rate in the template to the pay rate in your Excel file. And when you're doing this, again, at first, it can be quite a tedious process, but you only have to do it once. And as we saw before, you can create maps or saved mapping files in Sage. And the idea there is that once we've done this, we can create that file, save the mapping logic to make sure that when we're doing this in the future, we don't have to go through and sort of meticulously match each individual pay rate from the Excel file to the template. So as you can see, it is a relatively manual process. We're just going through matching up each pay rate. Once this is done, we can run the export, and Sage will take what's in the template and match it against the mapped fields in the code that we're doing here, and get your time and attendance data into the Sage platform. And where previously we saw the time and attendance data was zeroed out, that will then be automatically filled with the right number of hours for the correct employees, also having the right pay rates as well. So hopefully should save you a bit of time when you're processing payroll between the two platforms. So we're nearly done here. I think we've got one more at 950. So we go through, we choose 950, do a sanity check. So just make sure that all the fields match up. Again, if you have got quite a few pay rates to do, it's definitely worth checking for any errors in the mapping. Once you're done, before clicking finish, make sure you click on Save Map. As you can see, we already have a map that we created here previously. I'm going to delete that one, and I'm just going to create this as a new mapping file. So I'll call it Deputy Import July Payroll. And when we click on Save, we can see that that map file is now in use, Deputy Import July Payroll. So what that basically means is that the next time you're processing payroll, if you see a blank number of options under the import field, you don't have to go in and sort of manually add each column in the Excel file to the relevant column in the template. Instead, you can just load a pre-configured map. Again, we go to Load Map, we choose the map we've just created, and that will create the right mapping configuration. Again, if month to month pay rates change, or new ones get added, old ones get removed. You can still load the map that you used in the previous month, make any edits or adjustments, and resave the map for use in future pay runs. So again, the ethos here is to try and save as much time as possible to make sure that you're not every month manually editing these import fields. So once you're done, click on Finish. Those records will be imported into Deputy. We can see 9 records got updated, corresponding to the 9 employees on the platform. If we click on Close, we can then look into our time and attendance data, select all of your employees, click on Timesheet Entry. That will then bring up the time and attendance dialog. So for example, we can see that we've gone from having zeros in these fields to now having actual values. We can see for Ashley, she's got 127.5 hours booked in at 10:20. If we scroll across, we can see she's got, or should have some, nope, so yeah, that's correct. Ashley has only got one pay rate allocated to her profile. In Deputy, she does have a holiday pay attached to her profile as well. So for example, if we go back into Deputy, we look at Ashley's profile, at Ashley's timesheets in the export section, and we click on Group by Pay Rate, you can see that we do have 127.5 hours worked at 10:20, which does correspond to what we've just seen in Sage for Ashley. And she also has 8 hours of annual leave. So if you wanted to create annual leave as an additional pay rate in the Sage platform and have those leave hours brought over, that's definitely a possibility. Again, they're not getting brought over at the moment because in our pay elements, we just have our standard worked hours. In that case, you would create a new pay element for leave, and then you'd be able to map that to the Excel export and get those hours brought over. But aside from that, we can see that all worked hours have been brought over correctly. Again, doing another sanity check here, Edward has 75 hours at £11. Going back to Deputy, we can see here, Edward has 75 hours booked. And if we deselect Ashley, we can look at his pay rate, £11, matching exactly what's been exported into Sage. So that concludes our overview of the Deputy and Sage integration. If you do have any questions, please get in touch. We'll be happy to help out, and more than happy to get you set up and saving time processing payroll as quickly as possible. And thank you for watching.